Hello there, and welcome back to Shorts by Sam. In today's video, we're going to look at my last video and how I made it on Final Cut Pro. So I'm going to give you an in-depth sort of insight into the mind of me as a video editor, as well as how I shot the footage with my iPhone, if that makes sense. So, if I'm doing this correctly, and I'm sure I am, you should be able to see my screen. And here you can see the timeline for the video called Tate Modern. Which is just some clips that I took whilst I was at the museum last weekend actually. It was very, very good fun. It was great. And I really enjoyed making this video. It made me realise a few things about the Tate, as well as about iPhone cinematography, if that makes sense. So first of all, how did I shoot the video? Well, I used an iPhone 13 Pro Max, and I shot it in 4K at 60 frames per second. And that's it. That's all I had with me, was my iPhone. So the whole video is shot using an iPhone. And in terms of the funky movements and stuff that you see in the video, that's all just my hands, which even I'm surprised at, to be honest with you, because usually if you go back, 2-3 years, if you were going to do some sort of crazy shot with your hands, it would look like crap. But with the iPhone 13 Pro Max, they have an image stabilizer in there, so it's really smooth and buttery when you move things around in a fast movement. In fact, actually, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there was a viral video that went around on the social media sites that was talking, basically this guy that was making commercials using an iPhone, just literally throwing the phone around, and it was so stabilized and crispy smooth, if that makes sense. So when I saw that video, and I happened to be at the Tate, I was like, why don't I give it a go and see how I can use this to my advantage, if that makes sense. Cool, alright then, so let's just go into the basics of Final Cut then. So, as you can see, this is the timeline for my video. Which is great. So you can see obviously I've got a couple of different things in here. I've got the timeline for the video, I've got some overlap bits, and I've also got the audio at the bottom. So before I start making a video like this, the first thing that I do is always pick the music. So a website I like to use a lot of the time is a website called Uppbeat, and it's a pretty good website actually. They have a variety of different things on there. Let me just load it up here for you. It's called Uppbeat.io, and basically you can go in there and you can specifically find specific types of music, if that makes sense. Now, obviously, it doesn't want to load because this is a video. So it's always if it's a video, if you're doing something you want to show people, what does it do? It doesn't decide to load. So there you go. But Uppbeat.io, and it's 2 P's for Uppbeat, which is good. So let's go back to Final Cut. So first thing I do is pick the audio. Now, why would you do that? Why would you pick the audio first? Because you want something to sync your video up to. So it's very easy to just kind of go straight in with a deep end and to make a video and just kind of put it together and all that kind of stuff, and put the footage in the timeline that you want it to be in, etc., etc. But actually, you need the audio because you want to mix that with the audio perfectly, and that's how you make a really good video, if that makes sense. So as you can see, I've got my first intro clip. Now, with this video, I decided to do a slightly different thing. I decided to introduce myself from the third person almost, if that makes sense. So I wanted to kind of open with the subtle tone of the music to make sure that I could deliberately get out there, if that makes sense. So what I've done is I've faded the music up, and then I've just kind of left the volume on the clip so you can still hear my footsteps, etc., etc. And then when the music drops, I've gone into this sort of time-lapse sort of thing, very Casey Neistat-esque, if that makes sense, from that perspective. So let's just watch this bit back. So that's how I've done that bit basically for the introduction. Now let's zoom in a little bit and have a look at what we've actually done in terms of an editing perspective. So you'll notice the first thing, I'm not a big fan of fades, right? So fading between clips can sometimes look a bit shoddy, if that makes sense. It can look really bad. So what I've done is I've just done a jump cut, right? I've just cut between the two clips, and because it's kind of in line with the music, as you can see, it goes really well, if that makes sense. Now, what I have faded is the title. The title fades over the top of the image on top of that. So I just wanted to do that because when I had it there as a jump cut as well, it didn't really feel right. So a fade kind of eases it in quite nicely, if that makes sense. And then when you have a look at this clip here, you can see that I've sped this clip up by 598%. So that's my time lapse. Now, how would you do that in Final Cut Pro? Well, what you'd do is you'd find a clip, and then up in your toolbar, you'd click Modify, and then you'd click retime, and then you can go custom speed. Once you go custom speed, you can actually type in the percentage, or you can grab it and actually extend it or de-extend it or whatever you want to do with it, if that makes sense, by pulling it around and all that kind of stuff. So I tend to do it that way by pulling it around. I feel like I get a smoother edit, but you can type in percentages if you're working with specific things. So for example, this one is 598 and this one here is also 598 because I wanted them to be the same for the time-lapse piece, if that makes sense. So that's a really great example of how you would do it, but use a number, if that makes sense as well. Cool, so that's the introduction. So what happens next? Well, this is where I start to get into the groovy, spinny around, sort of move around sort of shots, if that makes sense. So the next part of the video looks like this. Nothing but my hands. I still can't believe it. I literally was just going like this with the camera. If that makes sense, nothing but my hands. Here I made a mistake in this video. So with the iPhone you can set your default frame rate that you want to record at. Mine was set to 24 frames per second at 4K. So I filmed the rest of the video in 60 and this one clip is in 24 frames per second. And you can see the difference between, apologies for the microphone there, you can just see how jittery it is compared to the 60. And that's because I messed up basically, but I wanted to use the clip still because the idea was, and what I was trying to do with this video was make it so like when there's a fast movement to a kind of slow movement or something going in one direction and the other direction, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how I've decided to do that. I then decided to speed up this one a little bit as well, so it's still natural, still me kind of moving the phone up and down, but it's sped up slightly. And then with this shot, I don't think I did it as well in the actual live video as I have done when I've re-edited it here. But the idea is I want to go between this shot and the next shot and make it look like it was a smooth transition, if that makes sense, with the phone. So what I've done is I've literally just cut the clip, right? So the clip is actually quite long. I've just cut it back to where it's about to kind of zoom up, you know, and then I've taken this clip where it also zooms up. And I've just kind of edited this one as well. You can see this one isn't... I started here, if that makes sense. So I've kind of edited them together and moved them and cut them slightly so that they kind of flow together. Let's have a look at how it looks. To be honest with you, it's not as good as I'd like it to be, but I didn't actually plan to make this video. I was just out and about and I thought, oh, this would be a good idea. So I just did it, if that makes sense, with my phone. So I didn't really put the thought process into how I'm going to edit it later, if that makes sense. Now, if you're doing a proper video, like a short film or something along those sort of lines, you want to plan it, right? You want to go, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to edit it this way, and then you go and shoot for the edit, if that makes sense. But I didn't do that this time. Very lazy, very naughty. With this clip here, it's actually one clip. It's not a widescreen clip that I've cut and masked. It's actually one clip that I've shot in portrait mode. So what I've done is I've literally just moved it from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen. And it's exactly timed to when I move the camera. So when I go like this in the video, I've timed it so that it goes across the screen, if that makes sense. So how do you do that? How would you do something like that? Well, what you do with something like that, and I'm just going to mute the music so I don't keep messing around with it. So what you do with something like that is you use keyframes, right? So you can see here I've got my my first image is on the right side, so that's the pixels, that's where I've moved it over to, if that makes sense. The x-axis is over there, and then if I move forward I've actually then changed the keyframe here. So what would you do? Well, let's just take this clip, right, for example, and I'll just put this over the top and show you a little bit how this would work. So with this clip, what you do is you specifically click on it and then you find an area you want to keyframe. So let's say I want to keyframe the scale, for example. I've keyframed it there, and then what I want to do is I want to click over here and then click it again and add a new keyframe, but this time I want to zoom in, right? So what Final Cut will do is it will actually zoom in the image based on my keyframe. So if I play that back now, you'll notice that it's actually zooming in. Do you see what I mean? And then if I want to edit the keyframes, I can actually show them, if that makes sense, a video animation, so you can see the keyframes there, and you can actually move them around. So I wanted this to be a bit quicker, I can do that like that, if that makes sense. Or if I wanted it to be a bit longer, I can do that like that. So that's one of the things that you can do with the keyframes. That actually looks quite cool. I mean, maybe it kind of starts a bit too late. Maybe if I started at the beginning and the end, it might look quite good. Maybe not for this piece of footage, but you get the idea. That's kind of how you would do a keyframe with those sort of things, if that makes sense. So that's it. So you'll notice as well on the audio track here that the audio comes to a halt here, and it moves into the next section of the song. So what I've tried to do is create a nice balance within the movie so that it moves from the sort of fast-paced, moving around section to the slow-paced area of the movie, if that makes sense. So let's have a look at this next scene. So first of all, I just zoom in, just using the same thing that we talked about just a minute ago. I zoom into the eye as it zooms in on the screen just to go into the next transition. Let's go from here. I always get, not emotional, but I love the feeling that that piece of music gives me. If that makes sense, it gives me a great feeling. And I think I've paired it quite well to the footage. So let's have a look at what I've done here. So first of all, first thing I've done is, you'll notice it here, is that because the audio is slightly quieter, I've actually put the background noise in from the museum. Because I thought it kind of added a nice ambience to the clip, if that makes sense. So you can see that in the background, so if I play that without the music, you can hear people walking around, you can hear the sort of echo of the room. It's quite a nice ambience to what we're looking at. You can hear people talking in the background, all that kind of stuff. And you'll notice here as well that the original video actually looks, looks like this. So I just had it I zoomed in with the camera, if that makes sense. I didn't like that transition on the video, so I've edited it slightly again. But this time I've done I've put it on top, but I've kind of slowed it down and moved it around, if that makes sense. So it kind of just fits over the top of it, if that makes sense as well. So that's kind of a better fit for the music. I wish I did that in the first edit, but I didn't. So I've done it in the second edit. So yeah, I've left the background noise in for all of these clips just to give that sort of ambience around. So you can hear it again, that you can hear the museum. And I think that adds something to the video that I'm quite happy with when I made this. So that's kind of what I've done with the background music. This is an iPhone with no motion thing. In fact, my youngest brother, I sent him this video, and he knows I've got one of the gimbals for the iPhone, and he was like, "Oh, did you use a gimbal?" And I went, "No, I used my hands." So it is really buttery smooth for just the hands. Before I continue, notice there's a little peak here in the music. The music's changing again, so I want to change the tempo and the theme of the video again based on the music, so you can see that this is what happens next. That noise is actually from that speaker that you can see on the screen. So I captured that and I was like, add it to the video, add it in there. So one of the things I think a lot of people make a mistake when they're making a video, and I'm not an expert, by the way, I'm just an amateur, but what a lot of people make a mistake on is they kind of feel like you have to either have background music or the sort of audio, the video. The answer is you can have as much music or as much audio as you like, and a great mix between the two adds to something that just makes it really powerful, if that makes sense. So that's what I've done with this specific clip. And yet again, you can see that I've edited it slightly. I haven't retimed anything on these sections. It's just the raw nature of the video, if that makes sense. Yet again, background audio is the museum, nice ambience, all that kind of stuff as well. Now, I used a fade here. I know I said I don't like fades earlier, but I've used a fade here. Now, why did I use a fade? Because I have this clip. I'll mute this again. Give me a second. I have this clip here where I put it down on the wall and I lifted it up. So it went from black to nothing. So I wanted to fade it from here to black. So this is a fade to color. You can see, and I've changed the color to black. So it fades to black, and then because it's already black, because it's on the table, on the wall, I lift it up and it kind of goes to them. So that's why there's a fade there, if that makes sense. And yet again, background music is in there, as well as the ambience from the museum. Let's have a look at these last remaining scenes. You'll notice again, I've changed it so this is kind of like the leaving shot. We're leaving the museum with my brilliant girlfriend as the actor in this specific moment. So she's walking down the stairs out of the museum, and then because the music takes a final crescendo and changes once more, I've decided to spice up the end a little bit as well. And that's it. That's my video called The Tate Modern. So as you can see, it's not actually that complicated. All it is just footage. And here you can get a really good idea of where I've used the ambience music and where I haven't. So you can see there's certain areas where I have used it and there's certain areas where I haven't used it, and all that kind of stuff. A few of the other technical details here. So there is a fade at the end. It just fades it out. This is a cross dissolve, which is this one here. Which you can use. And then the other thing that I've done throughout the whole of this video is I've also edited all of the footage, because with the iPhone 13 Pro Max it's all shot in HDR, so you have to pick the right HDR profile. Let me choose one for you. So you can see you can choose different HDR profiles and you have to pick the right one that you feel like is more natural, and will actually come out in the last video, if that makes sense. So that's a really quick overview into the behind the scenes, into how I made this video. I've had some great feedback on this video. A lot of people have said really nice things about it. The best comment I've had so far is beautiful, which, a film I've made I would never associate as being beautiful. But, I am proud of it. I'm proud of it because I didn't plan it. I'm proud of it because it's quite well done. And I'm proud of it because the music goes really well to the footage, which is just kind of luck of the draw, if that makes sense. And I think it proves the point that a lot of YouTubers, and including myself in a video I made before, is that one of the things about YouTube is you just have to make videos, right? It doesn't matter if they're shit. It doesn't matter if they're good. It doesn't matter if they're bad. You kind of improve on your editing style. You improve on the way that you do things and all that kind of stuff by actually doing it, if that makes sense. So you just have to get stuck in, and that's exactly what I've done with this video. So thanks for watching this kind of tutorial on how to use Final Cut Pro. It's more of a behind the scenes and how I made it video, if that makes sense. But if anybody's got any questions or wants me to do any specific topics on Final Cut, I'd be more than happy to. And just a nice little note in here, it's such a joy to be able to edit without any drop frames and all that kind of stuff with the 16-inch MacBook Pro, 24-core GPU M1 Max. It's a brilliant machine. I've got a video on it, and you can go check that out as well. So thank you very much, and I'll check you out in the next video, or maybe you'll check me out in the next video. Thanks very much.